Hello, my name is Shanice Ndlovu, and when I was a girl in the mud valleys of Matabeleland, I knew a story. My Goma, which is what I call my grandmother, she told it to me. A story of a world separate from ours, not a heaven or a hell, not above or below, but just beside. A world hovering over us and interwoven all at once like air, cascading skin, no less real for not being seen. She told me all those names of things that they were heavier on the tongue after dark, like amasenku, ispuku, amazimu, all those things that prowl the night and crawl your nightmares. Now, as I grew older, I grew into thinking, this can't be real. Who, me? Way too woke for wandering spirits, way too learned for ghosts. Besides, who needs demons when we have men, right? Well, this is the story of the night I learned that I was wrong. When I was 12 years old, I lost my mind for the first time. It was dark, I remember, and my uncle was driving us home from the city to my grandmother's village, and I was excited, obviously. I was completely beside myself. I remember watching the silhouetted trees speed past, like shadows in flight. And then, as our luck would have it, the car broke down. And then my uncle determined that there would be no fixing it. We were better off waiting it out in the car until dawn. That, or we could walk. My uncle's wife declared that she would be doing no walking. She was going to sit in the car and she was going to wait until morning. But she was outvoted by, the rest of us, my uncle, my sister, and I. We don't come from what you would call sensible people. No, or people that ever learned how to wait for anything. So we would walk in the dark, in the cold, in the night of Machiavelli. To this day, I cannot tell you where we got the goal to imagine that was something we were capable of. Now, from the onset, we faced a dilemma. There were two paths in front of us. There was the path that went through the field, and then there was the path that trailed the riverbank. Again, my uncle's wife declares that she will not be walking through the fields because people left their things there. Nobody asked what those things were. Nobody wanted to know. But, my uncle says, we cannot trail the river pathway. There are too many people left behind there from the war. Now, I was young then, but that warranted no explanation to me. But just a bit of context for you. There was a time in my country when there was a civil war of sorts. Well, not really a war, because war suggests there are two opposing parties fighting each other. My people weren't fighting, we were just getting killed. And a large majority of our slaughter happened by the river. Water washes away blood, I guess. And so that's what he meant by that. But my uncle is a husband. And, he knows that his wife has already lost once. She will not be losing again. And so he concedes. He folds. The river pathway will be taking then. Now, for some reason, I feel the need to emphasize here that all this is true. But then I'm reminded that the truth does not cease to be that simply because somebody else does not believe it to be. But know that if flesh is real, then this is real. Now, as I was saying, we walked. And I remember we were walking through this wet grass, like writhing like snakes. And then I was humming Peter Tosh in my head, trying to keep my Goma stories far from my mind. And I remember specifically it was the stepping razor, but it's not working. It's all I can think about. I already know we should have stayed in the car. I already know we shouldn't have taken the river pathway. But it's too late now. And we kept walking. Then we stepped onto the riverbank. The dark water body itself stretching out in quiet cold in the night, evident only in the searing cold that seemed to burn through flesh and trample on bone. Now, if we were people with any sense, we would have turned back then. But we aren't. So we didn't. But we all felt it. A change in the air. It was like a density in each breath that you took, you know, to let you know that you were treaded somewhere else now. I felt it mostly like a presence, like reaching out at me, like phantom fingers, you know, making to grapple and grasp, to hold me by the neck like the fear did. Because even then I was terrified. Now I saw my uncle reach into his pockets for a joint, and he pulled it out and he lit it. And I saw that his hands were shaking every time he brought that little ember to his lips. And I knew that he too remembered our Goma's stories. And he remembered that fire was supposed to keep the other world at bay. But would it do that this time? He was scared. We were all scared. But no one was talking. We didn't need to tell each other, though, to walk faster. We all knew, and we all did. Just as we didn't need to ask each other if anyone else had heard that childlike sobbing in the reeds. We'd all heard it. Just as we all saw the little fires dancing over the fields without any real flame. I wanted to fold and cry, but I knew there would be no time for that. Not when there was walking to be done. Then if I thought I had been cold before, I felt this heavy coldness. You know, like melancholy in metal, whipping through the air like a Chinese wind sword. It came at me, a whirlwind, sweeping me into a hold. I cannot say with any real certainty what happened after that. I just remember vital fragments of it, right? I was in this hold of wind, and then I heard them. Shrieks, hundreds of voices burrowing into my ears, men, women, and children screaming. I stood there in this trance, listening, fearing, men crying out, women yelling, children wailing. And I stood in a trance, and through my tightly closed eyes, I saw them, these phantom dust faces, and their glaring eyes, accusing eyes, searching for an enemy or a grave. I heard myself cry out, but it sounded like a voice from somewhere else, someone else's plea. And just then, I felt water sipping into my shoes. And that was when my uncle hit me. I remember it. It was a slap biting into my cheeks again and again and again and again until my eyes tore open, fading the faces and quieting the voices into echoes. I opened my eyes to him kneeling in front of me in tears. Beneath him and behind him, the river stretched out in quiet cold, as though she had never raged, as though she had never known blood. Why had I been trying to walk into the water? My uncle pulled me by the arm and threw me on his back and took into the trees, his wife and my sister hand in hand behind us. And we all ran as though the devil himself gave chase. We didn't stop running until we stumbled into our homestead. My uncle kicked open my Goma's door and laid me at her feet like luggage. I remember I had not thought to make a sound the whole way there, but the moment I looked up and my eyes met my Goma's, I crumbled into a heap of tears. I thought I would never stop crying. I thought I would cry myself out. And it makes sense that I haven't cried since. I haven't cried since that day, but I crumbled. And all the while, my Goma stared at me, looking me in the eye, holding my gaze in that way that only she has, that looks at me and actually sees me. And she said, "Why are you crying?" And in between the heaves and the sobbing, I managed to ask her, was it real? Was any of it true? And then she smiled and said, "Do you question the tree that grows outside this house?" I said, "No, I don't." And she said, "Why?" I said, "Well, I see it. I feel it. It's natural." And then she says, "Well, you see this, don't you? You feel this. Why then do you question it? This is as natural as the tree, child, as natural as the tree." Gratitude.